The cafeteria aide found Emmett under the lunch table again, pressed flat against the tile, arms locked over his head. She didn't try to coax him out, not this time. She radioed the office and waited 6 feet back until his grandmother arrived. No one knew why he'd stopped speaking at school months ago. No one knew how to reach him, and no one, not even Patty, his grandmother, could have predicted what would finally break through his silence. Emmett was 7. He hadn't spoken at school since October. At home, he said maybe 10 words a day, usually about whether the tags were cut out of his shirts or if someone had moved his shoes. His grandmother, Patty, kept a notebook the pediatrician asked for tracking meals, sleep, incidents. The last entry said Thursday, bit through his lip during fire drill. Wouldn't let me see it. The school suggested testing. Patty took him to 3 appointments before she found someone who could evaluate him without requiring physical contact for the initial session. The psychologist, a woman named Dr. Voss, observed Emmett through a one-way mirror for 40 minutes while Patty answered questions in another room. The report used words like sensory processing and selective mutism and possible trauma response. But it didn't tell Patty anything she didn't already know. Emmett couldn't be touched. He couldn't be held. If someone reached for him, even slowly, he would go completely rigid or hide. Patty had raised Emmett since he was 3, after her daughter died and the father was deemed unfit. She didn't know what happened in those first 3 years. The caseworker wouldn't say much, and Emmett never told her. For a while, she tried different therapists, but Emmett would only sit in their offices staring at the carpet, and they'd end the session after 20 minutes. By 2nd grade, the school had stopped pushing. They gave him a desk in the back. They let him eat lunch in the hallway if the cafeteria was too loud. Patty was 63 and tired. In April, her neighbor mentioned a dog. Patty had never wanted a dog. She didn't like mess, and the yard was small. But the neighbor worked weekends at the county animal shelter and said they had a surrender that was ungetting adopta. 3-year-old mixed breed named Hollis, part lab, maybe, part something else. The dog had been returned twice. First family said he was too anxious. Second family said he didn't interact with their kids. He just sat in the corner of the yard and watched the fence. Patty went to see him on a Saturday. The shelter was a flat beige building off Route 9 with a fenced yard out back and the smell of bleach and wet concrete. Hollis was in the 3rd kennel. He didn't bark when she walked up. He didn't come to the gate. He stood in the back corner and looked at her without moving. The worker, a younger guy in a volunteer shirt, said Hollis had been picked up near a foreclosed house 2 years ago. Thin, dehydrated, no collar. He was food aggressive at first, but that went away. He just never bonded. "Some dogs don't," the guy said. "But he's house-trained. Doesn't chew. He's just really quiet." Patty took him home on a trial basis. Hollis spent the first 3 days under the kitchen table. He came out to eat after Patty went to bed, and he used the yard at dawn. Emmett didn't acknowledge him. He walked past the table without looking down. Patty started to think the whole idea was stupid. On the 4th day, she found Emmett sitting on the floor near the table. Not underneath it, just near it. He wasn't looking at the dog. He was holding one of his picture books, the one about tractors he'd had since he was 4. Hollis was lying under the table with his head on his paws, watching Emmett. They stayed like that for almost an hour. Patty didn't say anything. She made dinner and left them alone. It became routine. After school, Emmett would drop his backpack and sit on the floor in the kitchen. Hollis would be under the table. Neither of them moved much. Patty couldn't tell if it was progress or just two anxious creatures existing in the same space. In May, Emmett started talking to the dog. Not full sentences, just fragments. "You don't like it when the trucks go by either. Your ear is folded wrong." Patty only heard because the kitchen was next to the laundry room, and she was folding towels. By June, Emmett was sitting under the table with Hollis. Patty didn't make a big deal out of it. Dr. Voss said not to. The school year ended. Emmett still wasn't speaking in class, but his teacher said he'd started using a communication board, laminated cards with pictures he could point to. Patty didn't know if that had anything to do with Hollis. She didn't ask. One night in late July, Patty woke up at 2 in the morning because she heard a noise from Emmett's room. She walked down the hall and opened the door halfway. Emmett was asleep on his side. Hollis was on the bed next to him, not touching, but close. The dog's head was up, and he was looking at the door. When he saw Patty, he settled back down. She stood there for a few seconds, then closed the door. In August, Patty was sitting on the porch when Emmett came outside, with Hollis behind him. Emmett sat on the steps. The dog sat next to him. And then Emmett reached out, slowly, hesitantly. He landed, put his hand on Hollis's back. The dog didn't move. Emmett left his hand there for maybe 10 seconds, then pulled it back. Patty didn't say anything. When school started again in September, Emmett's new teacher asked if anything had changed over the summer. Patty said no, not really. But Emmett was walking into the building now without stopping at the door. Hollis still slept in Emmett's room. They still sat under the table sometimes. Patty still didn't know what happened in those first 3 years, and Emmett still barely spoke. But on Saturday mornings, she'd see them in the yard. Emmett sitting in the grass, Hollis lying beside him. Sometimes, if she wasn't watching too closely, she'd catch a slow, careful hand brushing the dog's back. A gesture so small, so quiet, it could have gone unnoticed, except that for Emmett, it meant everything. And that was enough. Could this quiet bond be enough to unlock a child's voice? Could a dog really rewrite what we thought we knew about trauma? If you've seen or experienced a story like this, share it in the comments. And if you want more stories about the quiet, life-changing bonds between children and animals, subscribe and turn on notifications.